Okay, picture this. It's the year 451. The Roman Empire gathers its absolute sharpest minds to solve a puzzle that's at the very heart of Christianity and has been sparking riots and arguments for decades. They all meet at the Council of Chalcedon to finally tackle this divine dilemma. And what they decide is going to shape the future of the faith forever. So, let's dive into how they untangled this profound question.
And this was the question. I mean, it sounds simple enough, right? But the answer had absolutely massive implications. Think about it. If Jesus was only divine, could he really save humanity? And if he was only human, well, then was he God at all? The early church was really wrestling with this. How could two complete, totally distinct natures exist in a single person without watering down either one?
And this quote, wow, this brilliant line from the theologian Gregory of Nazianzus just nails why this whole debate mattered so much. The core idea here is that for Christ to save us, he had to take on, or assume, everything it means to be human, every single part. If any piece of our human nature was left out, the body, the soul, the will, then that part wasn't healed, it wasn't redeemed. Literally, salvation itself was hanging in the balance.
So to really get how they reached their final decision, we've got to trace the whole path of this incredible debate. We're going to start with the dilemma that was kind of left over from an earlier council. Then we'll get into the three major schools of thought that tried to solve it, each led by a genius theologian. And finally, we'll see how all their ideas came crashing together at Chalcedon and what that legacy means for us today.
You see, the famous Council of Nicaea, back in 325 AD, it settled that Christ was both divine and human. It declared him consubstantial, which is just a fancy way of saying he's made of the same stuff as God the Father, and also the same stuff as us. But it left a huge question just hanging in the air. How? How exactly did these two realities, the infinite and the finite, come together in one person? That ambiguity created a whole new crisis, and it led to decades of really fierce debate.
Now, to solve this puzzle, there had to be this critical shift in thinking. The older model, what they called logos sarx, or word flesh, sometimes made it sound like the divine word just sort of took the place of a human mind or soul. But theologians started to realize, wait a minute, that's not enough. So the new model, logos anthropos, or word man, insisted that Christ had to have a complete human nature, and that included a rational human soul. Why? Well, because they argued that sin starts in the soul. So to save us, the soul itself had to be assumed and healed.
Okay, so with this new framework in place, three major theological traditions popped up, each with a different way of understanding the union of God and man in Christ. And you gotta understand, these weren't just boring academic squabbles. No way. These were passionate, deeply felt attempts by the great intellectual centers of the empire to protect the very meaning of salvation.
And this slide lays out the different priorities perfectly. So on one side, you've got the Antiochene school, led by Theodore. They were all about protecting Christ's full and complete humanity. Meanwhile, the Alexandrians, with Cyril as their champion, they were laser-focused on the profound, unbreakable unity of Christ. And then you have the Western tradition, with Pope Leo, who brought this amazing legal and philosophical clarity, focusing on how two distinct natures could coexist in one person.
All right, let's start with Theodore of Mopsuestia and the Antiochene school. For Theodore, the absolute key to salvation was that the divine word had to unite with a complete, specific, real human being.
His big idea was the homo assumptus, which literally means the assumed man. The crucial point is this. Since Theodore believes sin starts in the human soul, the divine word couldn't just, wear a human body like a costume. No, it had to assume a complete human being, soul included, in order to heal us from the inside out, right at the source of our brokenness. And this really shows Theodore's vision of salvation as a two-stage journey. In step one, Christ lives our messy, mortal, struggling existence right alongside us. But then, in step two, through his resurrection, he forges a totally new path to immortality and spiritual freedom. By uniting with this assumed man, he's basically blazing a trail for all of humanity to follow him on that same journey to redemption.
All right, let's move to our next thinker. While Theodore was focused on the completeness of Christ's humanity, Cyril of Alexandria was deeply, deeply concerned with the unity of his person. He was really afraid that talking about two separate beings could accidentally split Christ in two. Cyril's answer was the unione sostantiale, or a substantial union. He argued that in the Incarnation, the divine word and human nature were bound together in this unbreakable, fundamental, or substantial way. This wasn't just a moral partnership. He saw it as a deep ontological bond that actually changed human nature itself, purging the evil from it at its very core.
So for Cyril, this powerful connection plays out in two incredible ways for us. First, because the Word took on human flesh, all of humanity is now linked to Christ by nature. We share this natural solidarity with him. But second, through things like baptism and faith, Christians can actually participate in Christ's divine sonship by grace, making that bond even stronger.
And that brings us to the West, and to Pope Leo the Great. He's the one who provided the clear, precise language that would ultimately help bring the other two traditions together and form the basis for the final compromise. His key idea was a kind of divine transaction.
Leo called it the commercium salutare, or the salutary exchange. It's such a powerful metaphor, a great trade. The divine nature takes on our mortality, our weakness, our suffering, and in return, human nature gets the chance for immortality, glory, and divine sonship. I mean, think about that. The Redeemer becomes one of us so that we can become children of God. It's an incredible exchange.
So you can see on this timeline how all these ideas cooked and simmered for more than a century. It all starts way back in 325 with Nicaea declaring Christ consubstantial. Then for the next 100 years, you have these heated debates between thinkers like Theodore and Cyril, who are often rivals. A huge moment comes in 448 when Pope Leo writes his famous letter, the Tome de Flavian, just laying out his doctrines so clearly. All of this intellectual and political turmoil was building to one single pivotal moment.
And that moment came in the year 451. At Chalcedon, all these different theological streams finally came together. The bishops and theologians gathered, and they were ready to hammer out a definitive statement that could, hopefully, unify the church once and for all.
So, what was the result? What did they decide? Well, the Council of Chalcedon produced a definition that would go on to shape Christianity for the next 1,500 years. But its impact wasn't just theological. It actually changed the entire focus of Christian life.
See, before Chalcedon, the big questions were fought out in public, often with tons of political drama. It was all about defining what Christ is. But after the council gave a definitive answer, the energy just shifted. Those huge public theological brawls started to fade, and the focus moved to the monasteries and the churches. The question became much more personal. How does one live out this mystery of salvation in their own life?
And this is the Chalcedonian formula in a nutshell. It affirmed that Christ has two complete natures, which honored Theodore's concern for his full humanity. It declared that these natures are united in one divine person, which satisfied Cyril's demand for unity. And it used the super-precise language championed by Leo. It was, honestly, a masterful synthesis, a theological compromise that became the cornerstone for most of the Christian world.
But here's a final thought to leave you with. The Council of Chalcedon did a brilliant job defining the what, one person, two natures. But in doing that, it basically enshrined a profound mystery. It never really explained how such a thing is even possible. And maybe that was its greatest legacy. It didn't end the conversation. Instead, it opened up a whole new frontier for centuries of spiritual exploration, art, and personal faith to keep on probing that divine dilemma.